Perth, Australia, stand up. Coming up this weekend, we have the respective UFC debuts of Jack Della Maddalena taking on Dead Game Pete Rodriguez, one of the weakest nicknames I've ever heard. However, Pete Rodriguez makes it real because he knocks guys dead, and in his 4 pro fights, he's finished them all in the first round. And this is a guy that just comes out winging from the first second. And if you look at his fights now, all the pro fights are with Icon, and then you go through and you go, okay, well, why is a guy that's 4-0 fighting a guy that's 10-2 who's won his last 10 fights? Well, then you got to actually consider the man Rodriguez's amateur career, because it's extensive. He went 7-2, knocking more guys dead over there. And the craziest part about it, you look at it, the level of competition as a pro is bad. It's bad. He took on 2-2 Jorge Olea at Icon FF. Number 2, then he fights at 3, then he fights at 6 and 7. He's not going to see it through for Jorge Masvidal's takeover of Icon, which is coming up very soon. But if you do look at it for Rodriguez, he beats Olea and knocks him out. He knocks out Yazer Guzman, who's 0-1. He knocks out Jose Luis Rios, and then he finishes Roberto Pixley. Now, Roberto Pixley, the best name on this record, because again, you're beating a guy who's 2-2, 0-1, 1-0, and 5-1. Roberto Pixley, 5-1. All 5 of his wins were against debuting fighters. So the level of competition is bad, but, and there's always a but, all of those guys were knocked out in the first round quickly. And if you look at the fight against Yaser Guzman, Rodriguez doesn't give it any time. He just runs across the cage, throws a flying knee like Jorge Masvidal, and knocks out his opponent. You look at his fight against Pixley, he just kind of takes his time, walks him into a corner, throws a hellacious right uppercut, and then just a straight left shot and drops him. So I absolutely love the power and fury that I have out of Pete Rodriguez, who, by the way, in his first 2 fights, you might go, who is this Pete Rodriguez? I can only find 2 fights. Pedro Rodriguez for the first 2. Look at it for Pedro Rodriguez.
The name's Rocco now.
Threw me for a loop for a little bit, but Pedro Rodriguez, Pete Rodriguez, this guy's a lot of fun.
He really is. And here's the comparison that I've thought of, and I think you'll agree with me. He's a lot like Chaos Williams. And honestly, the breakdown for his fight has sounded a lot like our breakdown for the initial Chaos Williams fight. It's, hey, he has eye-catching power, he is that talent, but he's knocked out a bunch of guys who he probably should be knocking out before he comes to the UFC. And that kind of is my prediction about what Pete Rodriguez's career could look like in the future, because I agree with everything you just said. Like, he has incredible power, and no matter what the stylistic matchup is in his fight, he's going to have a chance based on his power and based on his strike variety. And similar to Chaos Williams, we weren't very high on him coming into the UFC, and look how good he's been.
Yeah, don't get it twisted. So I have all these nice things to say about Pete Rodriguez. I have no idea what his ceiling is. He's coming in on incredibly short notice, replacing Warlley Alves to take on Jack Della. And when you look at it, Warlley Alves on his best day beats Colby Covington, and on his worst day gets knocked out senseless by Jeremiah Wells in a fight that he was halfway competitive in before that happened. So it really is a tough one. When you have so many unknowns on Pete Rodriguez, he comes out to dominate MMA in Arizona. It's a small gym. It's not fight ready. It's not the lab. Like, it really is a really tough one. Do I have any knocks on Rodriguez? Not a single one. Honest to goodness. His combinations look good. His power looks great. He's taking on Jack Della, who is one of the most well-known Australian prospects since Alexander Volkanovski, and they'll tell you about that. And they'll tell you, hey, Jack Della, when he was in school, he was into rugby. But then he had to give up the rugby dream to become an MMA fighter. Craig Allen played club team rugby in university. Maybe it's my turn to turn pro. Hey?
When you hear about these 30-year-old prospects, does it give you a little bit of, like, gas in the tank just to think, hey, maybe one day I could do it?
B-side, I scored in 7s. Hey, let's go. Wow. And listen, people might not believe this. I have witnesses. There were people at those games.
I don't know what any of that means.
And I played, like, I never played rugby as a kid until I was in university, and then nope. But when I look at this fight for Jack Della, there's a reason why he's such a hype prospect. And now I have to make this crystal clear, because Casey, I know you're out there. Cam, I know you're out there. Jack Della was the eternal MMA welterweight champion. And if you look at the fights that he had before he went on Dana White's Contender Series this past summer, he he fights two guys that are very important. Glenn Pettigrew, and then he goes out there and fights the man himself, Alden Bates. You might go, well, why is that important? Because those were both rematches. He beat Pettigrew the first time, well, he beat him the second time. But he did not beat Bates in their first fight. And if you do look at it, there's a great story about Jack Della. And it's just like our analogy that we use all the time off of an NBA 2K video game where Doris Burke talks about a conversation that Dwayne Casey had in the locker room. You just got to pound the rock. And how that relates to this is the fact that Jack Della gets finished in his first two pro fights. Most people either go out there and just lay an egg from here on out. They could have a career like Jay Ellis, and that happens. Or they tell their coach, listen, I'm going to win my next 10 fights. I'm going to go to the UFC. He said that. It happened. So it's crazy to see what Jack Della's been able to do. Now, that's just the intangibles. How about the skills? Well, I'll tell you about the skills. This guy can fight in either side. And the best part about him is when he's fighting from orthodox, his left hook is his best power weapon. When he's fighting from southpaw, his left straight's his best shot. And it's weird to see him because mid-combinations sometimes he'll switch stances and go to his left side and then fire away with that left hand and knock guys dead. So for Jack Della, it's the combination of combinations, but it's also his head movement and the way he's able to move on his feet that I absolutely love, because this is a guy that when he gets backed up, he can eat some shots, but at the same time, he's cognizant enough that he's going to move his feet both forwards and backwards, but also side to side, and I love that. And I've seen so much more fight tape on Jack Della as well.
Well, exactly, because there's so much more available. Now, that's a bit of a double-edged sword for Pete Rodriguez. The good news is you knock everyone out very fast, so no one knows where the rest of the footage is. But the thing about this fight is, I agree with you, Jack Della has all the intangibles that you look for when you think about a guy who's going to have more than just 1, 2, 3 fights in the UFC. He does have those intangibles to where he gets in and out of the pocket well, he seems to be a cerebral striker. None of that matters, though, if he does get hit by a 2-punch combination for Pete Rodriguez, and that's the only hesitation I have about even throwing, like, the L word that we never use on this channel on Jack Della, because here's the thing. Since he is somewhat hittable, and since he does move straight back with a lot of his striking defense, if Pete Rodriguez does have success early in this fight, and if he is able to get his timing early on, I could see him landing a massive knockout blow at some point early on in this fight. But the thing that Jack Della has going for him is that if he can even mix in his grappling a little bit, I think he'll have success. Be that not just with the pure wrestling, even just the clinch, I think that would be a great thing to give Rodriguez, just to switch up the looks. But if he can, like you said, switch stances effectively and make Rodriguez miss, the great thing about you having all of your fights finished in the first round is that you have great power. But it's also the Shane Carwin problem to where, hey, we don't know what you look like in the second and third round. And with the way Rodriguez fights, I don't think Rodriguez is going to look good in the second and third round. I famously said, not famously, we're not that big of a deal, but I said this a lot, where I don't think Paulo Costa has bad cardio. I just thought he was in some fights where he threw a crazy amount of output. And to be honest, Craig, you rolled your eyes a lot and you didn't agree with me whatsoever. And then he fought Marvin Vettori and showed that, like, hey, I have pretty good cardio. Pete Rodriguez, his fights haven't shown me what Costa has shown me. Like, I don't look at Rodriguez and think that he can throw sustainable power punches throughout 15 minutes. I think he does fight in flurries. So for me, this fight comes down to how does Jack deal with the flurries of Rodriguez?
And when you really do look at it, I mean, in certain fights, when I look at Jack Della, my comparable is Justin Gaethje. He's a guy that can really carry his power late in his fights. He can really parry with a lot of his opponents. And again, that's for better or for worse. In a fight like this against Rodriguez, 2-punch combination, it's bye-bye, night-night, and you could really end a UFC career. Like, this guy hits harder than a lot of people. And the scariest thing about Pete Rodriguez is he's one of the smallest welterweights you're going to see. And I wrote this down. His first pro fight was at 175. His second pro fight was at 175. His third fight was at 165. His last fight was at 170. When I look at him, he's not like yoked up. He's kind of like Mac when he's bulking before that next season of Always Sunny. It's just dirty bulk season.
There's a welterweight champion of another organization who has a very similar build to Pete Rodriguez. Oh, is Ray Cooper? Yeah, Ray Cooper III, the PFL welterweight champ, is kind of built the same way as Pete Rodriguez. Now,
inside, there's a poster over there with Ray Cooper III.
Here's the thing, though. Ray Cooper III, much better and, like, really good at wrestling and super technical. So not the best of comps, but he does have that compact build that you have to watch out for in Rodriguez. But The thing is, other than the eye-catching power, I still think Jack Della has the much more well-rounded game and the much more technical game.
Yeah, when I really do focus on this for Jack Della, not only the swagger in the cage, but when he goes for that second of the rematches, his fight before Contender Series when he's taking on Alden Bates, he walks out to The Payback by James Brown, and I absolutely love that song. And then in his fight on Contender Series against Ange Lusa, man, that's a lot of fun. Della's a minus 125 favorite. They go at it. The first round is nuts. And then it kind of sides more and more with Della. I mean, it was a 30-27 for me for Della in that fight. But I look at the odds for this one. Again, Della minus 300 favorite. You've got Rodriguez coming in a plus 250. Over on Tapology for those votes. 404 error code. You get 88% Maddalena, 74% have to win by knockout. For the 12% that have Rodriguez, 72% by knockout. And you've got 24% of them are turkeys. They have Rodriguez to win by decision. If Pete Rodriguez wins this fight by decision, I will chug a whole bottle of Poirier's Ghost Pepper Sauce for this channel. I'll do it.
Wow. I'm not going to, because there's always the possibility, and I just want to say that right now. I think Jack Della wins this fight 9 times out of 10, but power is like the thing you always have to watch out for. This is why MMA is such a great sport. You can win via a 20-point Hail Mary. Like, if you have Steph Curry and you're down by 15, that's great. He can help you, but all of his shots still only count for 2 points or 3 points. If Pete Rodriguez is down 2 rounds going into the third, and if he lands a massive uppercut, it erases all of the negatives from the previous 2 rounds. So that's why MMA is such a great sport, but you do, or at least I feel like you have to pick the more skilled guy, and that would be Maddalena.
When I look at this one for Maddalena, one of the things that I really like, A, from the left side, it's the left hook to the body, but B, I've seen him from orthodox go right hook to the body, left hook to the head, right cross. So there's so many different combinations out there that you have to watch for from Della, but I can say all of these things because there's so much more fight tape and he's knocking out guys, or not knocking out guys, so fast in the first round. So Pete Rodriguez, huge opportunity. He could definitely knock out Della Maddalena in this fight in the first round because he has that type of power. And Della Maddalena can get hit. Although I said his head movement's good, his core movement's good, and he moves very well on the feet, forward, backward, and side to side. Rodriguez is one of those guys that can shut your lights out. That's why I'm so confident in I'll drink a whole bottle of hot sauce if Rodriguez wins a decision, because that would knock my socks out in surprise. I could see Rodriguez winning this one in the first round. I like Della in this fight, but this is one of the most interesting fights on this whole card, and I can't wait to hear from everybody down below in the comment section, whether you feel strongly either way. Arizona's got a great shot here in dead game,
They
right?
do. They certainly do, but this should be a great fight.
Should be a great fight. Both of us going with Australia's Jack Della Maddalena to get the win. And again, we want to hear from you in the comments section for all of these fights, as well as on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So hit us up over there. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, and as we always say, let's get into it.